So, for those who don't know me, I am Julie Love. I run the Massachusetts School Nurse Liaison Project, which is 6 years old now and has just become statewide and state funded. Yay! As part of McLean, or as part of the Massachusetts Child Psychiatry Access Project. What I do is I offer education like these presentations. I can come and do live presentations in schools for professional development. I do webinars. Pretty much anyone could request one now. Just email me and I will send you the link to schedule one. And if it's a school, great. If it's just an individual who's like, hey, I really wish after school you would teach about ADHD, here's a date and a time, I'll put it on my calendar. And if enough people sign up, it'll happen. So anyone can get the ball rolling for that. I also do consultation. School staff can call me with any puzzles or problems they have regarding mental health in schools, and resources like the slides that we're showing before. So that's what I offer. I don't know if any of you, how many of you are already on my mailing list. I will be adding you to my mailing list, which just gets you a monthly newsletter, which I try not to overwhelm people's mailboxes. I do have 2 Zoom discussion meetings each month, one for school nurses and one for all school staff. I'm happy to set up any additional meetings if there's any other group of like, hey, could we have one for teachers or anything like that? Any school staff of an enrolled school can come to any of these things. And if you don't know if your school is enrolled, well, honestly, if your school isn't enrolled, obviously I'm not kicking you out anyway, but I do like to try and get everybody signed up that I possibly can, in part because that helps persuade the state that it's worth funding me. So if you want any more information about my program, my email is right there. And I'm also going to stick some links in the chat. I will do it again at the end so you can find them later. There's the link for requesting materials. There's the link to the calendar to see more of my stuff. There's my email. There's also a link to, I've forced SurveyMonkey to act like a website and have all my information. And there's the link to the evaluation. Zoom will let me know that you are here. The other requirement I need to be able to grant credit is I need to prove that you did an anonymous evaluation. So you follow that link, do the evaluation after the presentation, and then at the end of it, there's another link that you click that takes you to a place to request the certificate. And that's how I know that you did the evaluation, is the way you get to the certificate is through that link. So that's how that all works. Now, since I do grant credit, I have to disclose my conflicts of interest and commercial bias. I have no conflicts of interest or commercial bias to disclose. As I said, my program is funded by grant. So on the evaluation, it will ask, did I tell you that I have no conflicts? Did I tell you that my program has no conflicts? And then the last question is, was there any bias? And they mean commercial bias. As far as bias in general, I think technology is necessary and yet also evil. I think that's my bias for today. So let's proceed and see how you guys all feel about it as well. Normally, I'd also have something up here saying to go ahead and stretch and take breaks as you need, because in real life, in live ones, I want to make sure people knew that I know it's a long time to just sit and listen. You don't have to stay sitting. You're on Zoom, so you should know that you don't have to just sit and listen. But this was a very dense program before. And then the pandemic made it even more dense. And so there's a lot of material to get through. And so by all means, when you need to get up and walk around or stretch or anything, do that. Take care of yourself, because I'm going to just keep plowing ahead, talking moderately fast for the entire time. And I apologize for that potentially being an overwhelming amount of information. There's just so much information out there to try and share with you. So, and then afterwards, I stick around for as long as people want to discuss and ask questions. But of course, people leave whenever they need to. Anything over an hour gets you credit for however much time you spend. Zoom keeps track of your comings and goings. So start with the fact that, and a lot of this, as I said, was written before the pandemic. So we don't really have new numbers on these things that I could find, but basically these are not, if anything, they're getting worse. I think we can agree that over the last couple decades, mental health problems, whether it's Self-harm, the line that really went up, this one kind of stayed the same as the older kids. The younger kids started doing a lot more of it. ADHD, suicide, depression, mental health problems definitely have been increasing. And also in those same decades, use of tech has really been increasing. You know, how many of them own cell phones? How often do they go online? This was just a poll of kids. Got a quarter of them saying almost constantly. And this was not when they were required to go online to go to school. This was when they were in school and theoretically not online. This one with numbers going up and down is basically just the different social media platforms rising and falling, that whenever one's going down, other ones are going up. So is that good or is that bad? I wanted to have this be more interactive. So in Zoom, there's the reactions button on your toolbar. They don't have up and thumbs down available to you. So right now, do you think it's good or do you think it's bad that we have so much tech in our lives? Thumbs up if you think it's good, and the face if you think it's bad. This is the interactive portion. Or you can just call things out if you like, because you are allowed to unmute yourself and do that. Rest assured that if there's lots of background noise if someone's unmuted, I'll just pop in and mute them. Don't worry about it. Any opinions on that? When they ask the kids whether it's good or bad, kind of nice that they do not commit to the binary choices, and they have a more nuanced sort of, well, it's mostly good, mostly bad. And the vast majority was, yeah, it's both or neither. It's sort of a combination. I'm gonna see if I can move this so that I can look at chat at the same time, because some of you are giving your opinions in chat, which is a great idea. I just need to figure out where I can put chat where I'll be able to see it on the screen. Okay, there we go. That works. All right. And they can unpack this nuance even more. It's kind of nice seeing kids be sometimes more nuanced than the adults when they talk about this. Okay, this one over here is where they take that mostly positive and mostly negative and ask them in precisely what way is it positive and in what way is it negative. So among the positives, you know, being able to connect with people, you know, easier to find news and meeting people with the same interests, stuff like that. And among the negatives, I like how lack of in-person contact is among the negatives. So it's both connecting and disconnecting from people that contributes to it. This poll over here is even more interesting to me because it recognizes that you could have something that has good and bad influences on yourself, that like Facebook is great for emotional support and terrible for sleep. You know, just about everything is interfering with people's sleep. You know, whereas you've got Twitter is wonderful for self-expression and not quite as bad for sleep. Yeah, so looking at how things are sort of a mixture of good things and bad things available to them. So of course, people can say, we need the answer, so let's do research. And there's a lot of research out there saying that, you know, adolescents who spend more time on the news end up with more mental health problems. Not just adolescents, adults also. More social media, more diagnosis of depression and anxiety. And this one was fascinating because they studied the adolescents and they got a baseline of what symptoms or traits they showed. And then they had that baseline, and then they tracked their social media use for 2 years and then did a follow-up. And of the ones who'd used more social media, they had an increase in behaviors that can be symptomatic of ADHD. It's not that it's giving them ADHD, but it's giving them behaviors and traits that are what people with ADHD are struggling with all the time. So you look at this and go, well, yeah, more social media, more mental health problems. There we've got it. Except you got to remember that causation and coincidence versus causal factors are different. And so this is a wonderful site to go to called Spurious Correlation, Causation versus Correlation. And it was so much fun trying to figure out which graph to grab. Like this one, you look at these lines, yep, these are definitely related factors. Look how they track each other over the years. This is comparing the number of letters in the winning word of the spelling bee each year to the number of people who died from being bitten by spiders that year. So just because something tracks and correlates does not necessarily mean that they cause each other. And there's also lots of research out there saying positive things about it, you know, that they can increase access to care. They can increase life satisfaction. They offer community support. This one is like intrinsically good and bad. This one is saying that public postings can indicate when someone needs help. And they're not saying a person posting, hello, I need help. They mean that you could have just a bot, you know, a program looking at social media, and there's certain words that aren't necessarily help, but other charged, triggery words. And when those words increase, that shows a person is potentially going into crisis. And the suggestion was that you could have the bot then automatically call someone to go check on them, which is both really, really cool and incredibly creepy at the same exact time, which pretty much sums up tech in our lives right now. I like this slide because it points out how I like how social marketing is really close to the line. I kind of wish the line was going through social marketing. So when you got something that's good and bad, how do you decide what to do? And people don't tend to approach it in a systematic way. They tend to go with, this feels good, I'm going to do it right now, which is not the best way to make decisions. So I really like reacquainting people with, you know, a pro and con quadrant graph here, where you say, where are the good things with choice A and where are the bad, and the good things for B and where are the bad things with each one. And then once you do that, and I've got a lovely chart for doing this, it talks people through the process. It's not just whichever square is fullest wins. You then have to go back and look at the things in them. How good is the good? How bad is the bad? How likely is each one? And how long do they last? Having something that's not that great for 5 minutes, but you get something really good for an hour afterwards is kind of worth it. And once you've looked at all that, you then develop a plan. It might not be one or the other. It might be kind of a mixture, trying to do a little bit more of this one, a little bit less of that one, and so on. So, but to do this, to fill in this graph at all, you got to have the information. You have to actually know what are things doing to you. And most of what's going on with tech, people don't really even realize, because it's going on a neurological basis, on subconscious and neurological things that you are not, I mean, we are aware of definite problems. And I'm here to tell you about all the problems you didn't even know were out there. So we're going to talk about physical health, neurochemistry, learning, emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, and how the pandemic has increased all this. When I've added things, I highlighted them by using a different little arrow marker there. So as I said before, this was a really crowded presentation and it only went up to this bullet point. Turns out these 2 bullet points add even more information to it to be shared. So strap in, let's go. Let's start with the easy one, physical effects. Okay, repetitive stress injuries. So unsurprisingly, you would get head, neck, thumb. I love this one because someone found a thing that was talking about how much weight is on your neck, depending on where you're holding your head. You know, looking down at your phone is kind of like carrying a toddler piggyback all the time. There's also in your arms. Have you ever had time where you're on your phone for a long time and then when you straighten out your arm, your elbow's like, doesn't really want to move there? You're like, oh, that's not so great. And now with all of our increased use of tech during the pandemic, we add things like eye strain, which was kind of always there, but now it's way, way, way worse. Because if you spend all day with a focal point of 18 inches, that's really bad for your eyes. There's a general rule of 20-20-20. Every 20 minutes, you should make sure your eyes look at something that is more than 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. So make sure you take the time to like look out the window and so on, look around, because your eyes need those muscles moving that change your focal point. You know, I heard that people who grew up in like the jungle where there is no horizon, where nothing is, you can't see anything more than 15, 20 feet away because of obstruction. If you bring them out, they cannot see more than 20 feet away because the muscles for distance just are gone. They're atrophied. And so you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. And also just getting up and moving, getting up and walking around. I have a step counter on my phone. I had days during the initial lockdown where it would not crack 1,000 steps in the course of the day. That's really not great. So then there's accidents. People are aware of the fact that, yeah, don't text and drive. Don't talk and drive. Their accidents are 4 times more common when people are on the phone. And if you're like, yeah, that's why I've got hands-free, even hands-free, it's not just about holding the phone. It's about what you need to drive a car is you need your hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, and your mind in the car. If you are talking to someone, and people will be like, well, you talk to people in the car all the time. What's the problem? You're talking to someone in the car. Your mind is still in the car. If I'm talking to someone who's outside the car, my mind is not in the car. If I'm talking to someone and I suddenly stop because I need to suddenly brake because the car ahead of me stopped, the person in the passenger seat doesn't say, wait, why'd you stop talking? Are you mad at me now? I don't have to explain why I stopped. We are in a shared experience here that I do not need to be translating or dealing with the other person being ignorant of it. And so being on the phone at all makes you more likely to crash. Unsurprisingly, texting, even worse. I mean, you're texting, your hands aren't on the wheel, your eyes aren't on the road, your mind's not, you're barely there at all. It's amazing. It's not even higher than that. But you don't have to be in a car to actually do damage. People walk into things, people walk off of things, people get hurt all the time. Especially taking selfies. It's amazing the people who will be working so hard to get that perfect image of them standing in front of the canyon that they back right off the cliff. So yeah, accidents happen all the time when, again, your brain is more focused on what the phone is doing. And then probably the most pervasive one is the impact on sleep. Okay. One thing that people are increasingly getting aware of is the fact that blue light suppresses melatonin, and people are almost up to date on what all those words mean. Melatonin is the neurotransmitter or neurochemical that tells your brain it's sleepy time now. And we evolved in a world where it was basically you're in daylight all time, you should stay awake, and then sunset happens, the light gets more red because of sunset, and the brain goes, oh, red light, time to go to sleep in a few hours. If you are shining a blue light into your face, your brain doesn't get that message and it does not produce the melatonin, which is why people go and buy it in pill form all the time now. So what you want to do is reduce blue light, and that is anything from a screen. If you go down a street at night, you can tell who's watching TV because the blue glow, no matter what they're watching, it glows blue. So there are glasses you can get that say that they are screening out blue light. You would want to actually look and see how much validation they've got that they're actually doing that. But in general, if you can just avoid screens, avoid looking at screens as much as possible for a couple hours. I mean, there are people who are like, oh yeah, it doesn't bother. I fall asleep looking at my phone all the time. Like, yeah, you'll fall asleep when you're exhausted, but you don't get into real restful sleep until the melatonin shows up, and that's not for a couple hours yet. There's also the fact that it's really hard to fall asleep when you are excited, and dopamine activation is very stimulating, very increasing your heart rate, your temperature, and other things that inhibit falling asleep. So what does dopamine have to do with our phones? Turns out pretty much everything. Now, dopamine is not just a feel-good neurochemical. It is the reward neurochemical. It's like, it's there to reinforce behaviors, to tell you, yes, do more of that. That thing you did, do it again, do more of that. So it's like the happy puppy biscuit in your brain saying, good job, do it again, do it again. It is because we are human Homo sapiens and thus very intelligent. We're very focused on patterns, looking for this was here and there was food there and I see the same thing, there might be food again. So it's looking for patterns. And so dopamine is strongly reinforced by anything related to patterns. Have you noticed that an awful lot of our most pointlessly compulsive games that we play, I mean, look, we all know what you're supposed to do now, right? Who's just twitching, wanting to switch these two, Why? Why would that be at all satisfying? Why would that be something? I mean, everyone who's played any of these, you know that you kind of feel good when you're playing it. It's because the dopamine is going, good job, do more, good job, do more, and is reinforcing it. It also it responds to cues, things that are associated with good things, same as it evolved to say, when you see that, food might come. And so anything that might indicate something positive coming, you know, who can look at that screen and not have all those red dots kind of poking at them saying, ooh, I should do something about that. I should do something about that. Because dopamine is saying, if you respond to the cue, something good will follow. And this is not just modern screens. This has been there for a long time. They did a study back in the 70s to say, what is the most unignorable sound? What do you think is the sound that they came up with as most impossible to ignore in like the 70s? Think it's easy to ignore now? What do you think? Yeah, phone ringing. Because when the phone rings, you then have human connection. Not as good as in person, but something. And that's something that dopamine wants you to do more of. And so phone ringing is something that drags your dopamine circuit. And if any of you nurses have worked on a unit, you see this in action, because a new grad, you know, the phone's ringing all the time. You don't answer the phone because that's what the unit secretary does. If everyone stopped things to answer the phone, they would not have the right answer. And so you're sitting there to do your work and the phone's ringing, and new grads, they can't get anything done because it's so distracting, because the phone's ringing constantly and not necessarily getting answered immediately. But after about a week, because you can train your dopamine pathway to shut up already, after about a week, phone's ringing and they don't bat an eye. They don't twitch at all in response to it. Meanwhile, the patients are coming out of their rooms trying to answer the phone because it's driving them up the wall. So what dopamine is doing is it's really, really responding in anticipation of what it wants to be getting. So, for example, an addict, if you're an alcoholic and you drive home, pull in the driveway, go inside and start drinking every night, after a while, the moment you pull in the driveway, the dopamine starts flowing, because home, driveway, booze. If you've decided, okay, nope, I'm getting sober now, and you go in and you don't drink alcohol, the dopamine pathway kind of gets pissed. It's like, wait, no, driveway supposed to be followed by booze. You promised me booze. Okay, no more dopamine for you. And the dopamine pathway shuts down abruptly. And that hurts way more than pretty much any other abrupt discontinuation of a neurotransmitter. That's what we call craving. That's why once you decide to not respond to what the dopamine wants you to do, initially, it's even harder. So when you're trying to train yourself off of responding to these things, anticipate that it's going to take about a week before it starts to work. So are we saying that tech is literally addictive? And yes and no, because addiction is not just dopamine being wired into things. Dopamine is wired into everything. Dopamine's there. Addiction is when you keep doing something, even though it's really obvious that it's messing your life up. Okay, despite evident damage to your life. There's lots of mnemonics in the universe. This is the only one I like. I really hate mnemonics in general because it's usually like the second letter from the third word in a phrase that vaguely relates. This one's pretty straightforward. This is the Cage assessment for alcohol. It's kind of creepy how much it applies to everything. You know, cut down. Have you tried to cut down your consumption, your use of tech? Tried being the operative word. If you've tried to cut down, it means you've identified that's too much, and in all likelihood, you have not succeeded. So, do you get angry when people confront you about it, or anxious at the lack of access to it? And think about it. If you're leaving the house and, oh, I forgot my keys, you're like, oh, go back and get your keys. But if you're leaving the house and your phone is not in your pocket, you're suddenly like, oh my God, where's my phone? You know, you get way more anxious at lack of access to it. Guilty. This is identifying that damage to life thing. Do you feel guilty or bad about the impact that this activity or substance has had on your life? And then the last one is eye opener. That is, in alcohol world, do you have to have a drink first thing in the morning? Because The time asleep when you haven't been drinking has been enough for your body to start going into detox, and you're feeling physically sick from the lack of alcohol. And thus you need to give it some alcohol to stop the withdrawal process, which you think, okay, that's just so physiological. That's totally not going to relate, except there's studies showing that there's a really, really high percentage of people that the first thing they do when they wake up is look at their phones and play with their phones and do stuff on their phones. Now, for a lot of us, our phone is our alarm clock. So that part we grant you. But once you've turned off the alarm, how often are you, oh, let's check some email, let's look at Facebook, let's play a game, doing other things before you even get up. There's also the fact that for a lot of people, doing something, whatever, on their phone might be their go-to coping skill. I mean, how many kids do you know where when they are really stressed out, they want to go, I've got to go to the nurse's office, I'm so stressed out. And what do they do there? They want to sit down and look at their phone. They want to do something on their phone. And it makes sense that your phone is your coping skill. It's the best friend you ever had. Because it's always there for you. You know exactly what it's going to have to offer. And whatever it offers, frequently is at least neurochemically soothing. And for a lot of people, once the pandemic happened, not a lot of other options available. So they did even more of it. But no matter what coping strategies you have, even if you got healthy ones, if you don't have enough of them, that's unhealthy. If it's your go-to only one, that's going to be unhealthy. So there are things that people say, yeah, but tech is really good in many ways. So here's your chance. Yay or nay? Instant access to information. Is that a good thing that is sort of the compensation for the bad things I just told you about, or is that intrinsically not so great itself? And yeah, I know there ought to be a middle ground symbol, but there isn't. So as I teach you that there is no binary, give me a binary assessment of what you think. And it's not telling me if anyone's actually doing this. Yeah, we got a couple people putting in the chat. Should be that you could just click on it and it would show a little counter of how many people clicked what. But lots of people think instant access to information is one of the good things. And got to break your heart now, because to me, it's one of the worst things about tech. Okay. What it does, first of all, instant access to anything is usually not good, because it reinforces this inability to wait, this impatience. Used to be boredom was a discomfort that you dealt with. And being able to deal with discomfort makes you a lot more resilient to dealing with increased discomfort or dealing with pain, as opposed to being completely sidelined by it. But now, if someone's waiting in line, no one's just like standing there being bored. Everybody, oh, I might be standing here for 30 seconds with nothing to do. Well, good thing I got my phone. I'm going to play a game. And if you cannot tolerate any discomfort at all, you lose the ability to regulate your emotions in general. So it makes people way moodier. But even the information itself, as we know, not always reliable. But the fact that it is in typed form or in a public forum like online ends up being treated as fact. And it's not just the news. When you see a news story, people are not very good about going and fact checking whether or not it's true. And we've noticed this an awful lot in the last 2 years, but it's been there before. But also, just if you get a text from someone, you are neurologically more likely to give it more credence because you saw it in print than if you heard it as word sounds coming out of their mouth. And then there's the fact that it doesn't give you a chance to figure things out. I love this quote that someone had of, remember when you used to have to wonder about things? Remember when you used to have to sit there with the discomfort of not knowing things, which again is that intolerance of mild discomfort. Okay. But also, if you don't know an answer to something and you can't just immediately look at it, sometimes you'd actually figure it out. So now I do need people to participate in chat, because I want to have us do one of these things. What do you think? We've got, how many people do we have here? We've got 11 people here. Do you think in the next like 2 minutes, we could, without Googling, do not Google, even though you could do it without seeing, but without Googling, do you think we can figure out what the circumference of the Earth is? Think that's possible? So let's go for it. How many miles are there between the East Coast and the West Coast of the US? Someone throw in chat the number of miles between East Coast and West Coast of our country. Anyone, please? It might take a few. And you're not allowed to Google it. Does anybody know? Over 3,000. It's actually about 3,000. Yes, we got 3,000. Okay, now, how's the time change? How many hours different in time change? Right now, it is 10:36 here. What time is it in California right now? Anyone? Anyone at all? 7. Yes, so 3 hours. So 3,000 miles equals 3 hours of time change. How many hours are there in a day? Yeah, that one's easy. 24. Yeah, everybody knows that one. Yes, I know that one. So that would mean the circumference is about 24,000 miles. And now if anyone wants to, you can go Google it and see that that is a pretty damn good estimate, given that we did it off of just the information we already knew, which is kind of cool. The problem with instant access to information is that you not only don't figure things out, but you don't have as much information lying around that you know, because anything that you can get easily, you don't hold on to. If you can look something up immediately, your brain automatically decides it does not need to remember it because it was easy to get it. It'll be easy to get it if I need it again later. So you do not, I mean, think about it. How many phone numbers did you know off the top of your head when you were a kid? And how many phone numbers do you know now? You know, I have to go double check what my husband's phone number is every time I'm trying to give it to someone, because I'm not entirely sure I've got it memorized. Mind you, my phone number growing up, still know that one, 312-537-5981. Yep, that's there. The one I use all the time, not so much. So memorization gets a bum rap. People, you know, we talk about kids back in the like 20s where part of school was to memorize and be able to recite a poem, and how silly that is, that was part of what they would have as part of school. Except no, it actually is really good exercise. That's kind of like turning to a musician and saying, oh, playing scales is stupid. There's no real music in a scale. Yeah, it might not be a good song, but it's an excellent thing to do to get better at everything else. The brain needs to practice. How do I collect? How do I store? And how do I retrieve the information that I need? And memorizing something is practicing that skill so that your brain will be able to do it with all the things you need, because you can't always stop and Google things. Sometimes you actually need to know them off the top of your head. There's also the fact that the more things you bother to keep lying around in your brain, the more material you have lying around your brain to connect. I was really kind of worried with only 11 people here about doing that thing, about figuring out the circumference of the Earth, because in all the times I've done this presentation, if there's less than 15 people in the audience, it's way, way too likely that none of them know that it's 3,000 miles from coast to coast, and we can't even get started. You know, generally, I need at least 15 people to get someone who says 3,000, and probably less than half of them automatically know the 3 hours. Everybody still knows 24 hours in a day though, so we aren't totally lost. But having the information, you know, as I said, having the Legos lying around in your brain to build things out of is important. And creativity and creative thought is noticing connections that no one else noticed between stuff that's lying around in your brain. Plus, doing a mental structured activity improves your ability to focus. And doing something that is really no fun at all, just because you're supposed to, improves your ability to persist, your ability to do things even though they don't feel good to do, which is really important. Who's heard of the marshmallow test? Raise your hand if anyone has heard of the marshmallow test. There is a video to this that we don't have time to watch because short on time. Anyhow, this guy was experimenting for his PhD in sociology, and it was back before they made you do honor review boards. So he was experimenting on his kids' preschool classmates. And basically what he'd do is he'd take this 4-year-old, put him in a room and say, here's a marshmallow. If you don't eat it, I'm going to go out and going to bring in a second one. And if you have not eaten the first one, you get 2. But if you eat the first one, no more marshmallow for you. And then he'd leave basically forever from the point of view of the 4-year-old, because he'd be gone for like a good 15, 20 minutes. And when he came back, if they didn't, and some of the kids could wait, some of the kids couldn't. When his son was in like high school and talking about his classmates, the father recognized some of the names, because the son's like, oh yeah, so he's going to Harvard. And he's like, hey, I remember that kid. He like did not touch that marshmallow. And son say, oh yeah, this other kid, yeah, he's going to jail. Oh yeah, I remember that's the kid who ate the marshmallow pretty much before I left the room. And so they went back and did the study and saw that those who were able to delay gratification did better in everything: health, education, grades. But the really key thing about this is that if you watch the video, and do go watch the video, you'll see kids doing stuff. It's not just that some kids are just intrinsically able to wait and other kids aren't. It's that they will do things to get through the wait. They are actively pursuing activities or skills. You can teach people these skills. You teach them the skills, and here's like some real good suggestions over here for how to, practice self-control, teaching skills. And the problem with skills is you can also lose them. And tech, to a great extent, is training these skills out of us. I mean, like I said, even just I don't really like waiting in this line and being bored, but I got to do it to get what I want out of the universe. Nope. You don't got to do it. You can play on your phone and not be bored. So we're kind of training the ability to wait out of everybody. I don't know if the pandemic really helped since everyone had to wait so much, but okay, attention, multitasking. Yay or nay, good or bad? Do you think tech makes us better at it or worse at it, or is it a myth? Generally, it's a trick, because there's 2 things that we call multitasking that are different things, okay? Multitasking is doing something that's very automatic, that does not take conscious thought to do, or it's using a different part of the brain on 2 different tasks. This is why listening to music while you're doing work totally works. If I'm writing a paper and I'm listening to a book on tape, not so much, because it's using the same part of the brain. But if I'm using different parts of the brain, it can actually help both of them work better, which is why let kids doodle. If a kid wants to doodle in class, that can help them focus more. Switch tasking is when you're trying to do 2 things that are too much the same and you're going back and forth between them. So this is where I hope you all brought paper and a pen, because I have a task that I want you to do, okay? I am going to, so take out your paper. You're going to write 2 lines, okay? On the first line, you write, my name is, and then you write your name, okay? On the second line, you write the numbers 1 to 20, okay? So you're gonna write those 2 lines. I'm gonna set a timer over here. So when you finish, look at what the number on the timer is and put it in chat, okay? So don't start until I say ready, set, go. So ready, set, go. Wow, you write fast. And about half of you have put something there, then I'll go ahead and stop the timer. So now the experiment is you're going to write another 2 lines. Again, you're not starting till I say ready, set, go. All right. Now this time on line 3 and 4, you're writing the same thing. You're writing my name is, and the numbers 1 to 20, but you're not writing all of one and then all of the other. You're writing the first letter of the sentence and then the first number of the sequence, and then the second letter and the second number, third letter, third number. So it'd be M1, Y2, N3, so on. Everyone understand what that is? So start when I say ready, set, go. Ready, set, go. And again, you'll put the time in chat. Got one person who went from 18 to 25. Yeah, sometimes you run out of numbers if you got a really long name, but how long did it take you to get to that many numbers? The thing is about switch tasking is that it slows down your progress on both, okay? And it really increases your stress. I mean, quite aside from it taking longer, how did it feel that second time through? Was it like more stressful and upsetting? It also impedes short-term memory. You know, your working memory for this task does not carry over to that task and thus gets flushed. You come back to your first task and you do not have the working memory anymore. So your short-term memory gets impaired. And as we all know, if you are interrupted when you're learning, you do not remember it. Ask any teacher how much the kids learn on a day when there are lots of announcements during the class versus a day when there aren't, okay? Now the kids will say, yes, yes, of course, that's because you guys are old and we grew up this way so we can do it. And they appear to be more able to juggle. It's because they're not bothered by the interruptions. They don't express that stress because you don't mind it when someone interrupts what you didn't really want to be doing in the first place so much. You know, if you've got a kid who's doing their homework and also in a text conversation with their friend, in a way, it's more that the homework is just something that keeps them from getting bored during the gaps in the texting. It's not, you know, the homework is interrupting the texting isn't interrupting the homework. So we have to remember that, and doing something like this with the kids might help them recognize that, yeah, switching back and forth is hard and is distracting. But again, if one of the things that you're switching to is dopamine driven, it's going to be hard to let go of. Our attention tends to be drawn by something that's new and different rather than what really is valuable to be paying attention to. Okay. We talk about ADHD as if it's a deficit of attention. It's a very badly named disorder because they've got loads of attention. Everybody has loads of attention. What the people who don't have the traits or the diagnosis of ADHD have is a bit higher ability to ignore the competing stimulus. You know, if there is someone talking to me and there's something ticking over here, I listen to the talker. If I'm easily distracted, then the ticking makes it harder to focus on the talking person. Okay. When you look at this, everything is either something that matters or something that is right now, urgent. Okay. Things that are, we'd like to be focusing and prioritizing all the things that are important. Okay. The things that are important and do it right now, those get done. But the things that are important, but not so pressing, you know, like retirement savings, health, we'd like to be doing those too. Instead, though, our brain is hardwired towards moving targets. So anything that is now. And so things that are not important, but right now, pretty much always win out over the things that are important and not so pressing. You know, I'm writing a letter to my boss and it's very important. And my sister is live tweeting me a movie she's watching. Of course, the letter to the boss is more important. But every time the phone chirps, my brain insists that that is new and therefore more important than whatever the static thing in front of me is. Which is why you need to get it out of your realm of, detrain the dopamine pathway, which again is going to take a while. If you tell the kid, okay, no more having your phone in there while you do your homework, which would be great. They did a study where people coming in to do a test, half of them left their phone at the front desk, half of them turned their phone off, but had it sitting on the desk next to them. The ones who had their turned off phones next to them did worse on the test, because just having it there, your brain's going, I wonder if someone's texting me now. It might be doing something. It might be doing something. And again, withdrawal, the craving cranks up. So if you tell your kid, okay, for a week, if you say, okay, tonight, try not having your phone in there, they'll come out and say, I was way less focused. This is a disaster. Give me my phone back. Yeah, they're going to be way less focused because the dopamine is going to be cranking out craving for them for several days. And then it goes down and then they can focus better. But we want to recognize that part of what we need to do is be able to figure out what is important, put the tasks in the right order, know when we need to start them, and how do you move to the next task? All of which are really, really hard when you've got dopamine poking you and when your tasks are all a muddy mess of everything being at the same time. Transitions are very, very difficult. Okay, sense of community. There's another thing that people talk about. The internet, social media, it's all social. So good or bad about the fact that you can connect with people without needing to be right in the same room with them. Good, bad, votes, anyone with opinions. I'll move on so we don't run out of time. But generally, it's great that people who are a minority of any sort, whether it's a gender minority or racial or religious, or you've got a diagnosis that no one else has and no one else can understand what it's like to have chronic fatigue syndrome, you can connect with other people who understand you and you don't feel alone. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. As this guy points out, we could now find our people in ways that we couldn't when it was all limited by time and geography. Unfortunately, this applies to everybody, including people with very, marginalized opinions because they are opinions that hurt people. So you get a bunch of racists together, or a bunch of people who want to hurt someone together online, and they all start feeling very validated that their opinion must be a prevalent, correct opinion. Even just as far as if only people agree with you, it becomes really hard to imagine that the people who disagree with you exist, let alone exist in a larger number or matter in any way. There is a fact that people who are struggling, with a diagnosis or mental health issues, they can find others who can relate, which is wonderful. Those people could be very supportive, or they could be very toxic. I mean, if you're a teenager who struggles with self-injury, you could find a site where people go, yeah, I know, no one understands why, but I feel like doing that too. And when you feel like it, reach out and we can help each other resist. Or they might find a site where someone says, here, I'll tell you how to hide the stuff better. Here, how to get away with it. There's scary numbers of websites out there helping anorexics know exactly how many calories are in things, exactly how to fool the scale, exactly how to hide it while they starve themselves to death. So could go either way. And one intrinsically bad thing in there is that this is happening when kids are developing their sense of identity. And yeah, you don't want their identity to be that no one understands them and they're some sort of freak, but it also can end up that the community they find is defined in terms of them having this problem. And therefore, resolution of that problem would mean that they don't have their community anymore. So that's a real strong barrier to actually not having the problem anymore, or making it smaller. So it can be really, really hard when kids define themselves in terms of whatever their problem is. And across the board, if you can always, always, always find people who agree with you, it means that increasingly you got no reason to spend any time with people who disagree with you, and you don't develop any social skills for being able to navigate that. And we can definitely recognize that that has been going to town over the last couple of decades, but especially the last couple of years. That, you know, people talk about urban environment as being a wonderful, you know, you get to know so many people that are different from you and so on. I think technically, it's like when I came home from college, I went to a small liberal arts college, 1,200 students. My brother went to University of Illinois. His college had on campus 3 times as many human beings as my college had living alumni on the planet. So, and he said that it was terrible because I wouldn't know anybody different from me because I didn't have enough people to meet. And I pointed out to him that at his campus, he could pretty much find 50 people pretty much identical to him. My college, not so much. So I'm going to have to hang out with people who are different from me because generally everyone has maybe 50 friends in college. You know, 50 is a good size for your social circle of real people to be. And if you've got a huge selection to choose from, like the entire world online, you can populate it with people who are just like you. Whereas in a small town, everybody's got to get along with everybody else, whether they are similar or different. So immediacy of connection, good, bad, take a vote. The fact that you don't have to wait anymore, you can reach people right away. I gotta predict. Oh, people saying good about that one. I really thought since school staff tend to be the ones that the families are expecting to connect with instantly, you might see the downside on this. Because again, all of these, as I said, we live in the gray zone. There is the fact that you can feel more connected to people. My daughter goes to school in the Netherlands. That would be intolerably painful if it weren't for the fact that I know that I can reach out to her anytime and I can FaceTime with her and I can see her and so on. It's very, very comforting to know that, to feel like people are right there. I mean, imagine if we did not have any of this and we had lockdown, how much more isolated we would feel. The problem is feeling like everybody's right there all the time can also be very embarrassing. Can feel like any mistake you make is on public display. And the fact that everyone is connected all the time makes people very impatient for connection. You know, if you go to school and you're wearing a new outfit and you want your friend to admire your outfit, and you go to school and your friend is homesick and they are not there, you do not feel upset that they did not compliment your outfit because you know they did not see it. But if I take a picture of my outfit and I post it, and unbeknownst to me, my friend in her house is sick in bed and doesn't even look at the posting for 3 or 4 hours, I spend that 3 or 4 hours wondering why she didn't comment on my picture. Does that mean that she didn't like it? Is she not liking me anymore? So people get very twitchy about whether or not they're getting that feedback immediately. They feel like everyone must be seeing them right now. And therefore, if they aren't getting a response, then it's the same as if the person was looking at them and choosing to not respond. The fact that you can get help with anything immediately makes, again, you not figure things out for yourself. You know, if you remember when I'm just blithely assuming that everyone in the audience right now is my age. So when I was a kid, if I needed something from my mom, I'd call her work and leave a message with like a secretary or someone, or no one would answer. I'd have to call again later, but she gets a message and she calls back like an hour or two later. And by that point, I usually forgotten what I'd called about or I solved it myself. I figured it out myself. I either figured out that it's not vitally important or solved the problem myself. But now if someone calls me, I give them the answer right away. You know, the number of times in our family where we will call or text someone, where is thus and such, rather than looking for it. And it was in plain view, but we've totally lost the ability to look for anything in our family rather than asking other people to tell us where it is. And it's not always just looking for objects. Sometimes it's its emotions. You know, I'm really upset about something. I need you to make me feel better. And if I can reach you and you make me feel better every single time, I lose the ability to comfort myself, which is a problem. This also means that if I know how terrible it feels that I was crying and I needed you to answer me and help me feel better, I really worry that I need to be there for my friends. That if my friend needed me, I need to make sure I'm there for them too. When parents have tried to say, like, oh, no phones after 8 o'clock, the answer is usually, but what if my friend needs me? I've got a friend who's going through a lot right now and she might need to text me. So I need to be able to get texts from her. And so there's this real emotional enmeshment feeling of needing people to be there for me and needing to be there for other people. And as you grow up, it becomes work, where everything in work now needs to be 24/7, and we all have seen that where, yeah, I sent it, I send out the newsletter and stuff and I get the auto replies, and some of the auto replies are no longer just saying out of office. There was one saying, I'm getting, basically, there are so many emails about COVID that we cannot answer emails promptly. Please be patient. It might not get answered until later in the day or after school hours. And I wrote back saying, oh God, don't tell them you're going to answer email after school hours. You should not be working after school hours. You should not have your automatic reply say, yes, yes, I will work 24/7 for you to answer your emails. But that's what the immediacy of connection makes everyone expect, resulting in no boundaries anymore. I mean, kids were never good at boundaries in the first place. Okay. Kids would come, the 9-year-old would come in and blurt out something in front of the whole class. And the teacher would have to kind of tell them, that's really not something that you tell everybody. Okay. It was bad enough when a kid would say something like that in front of 10 or 20 peers. Now they'll post something like that in front of the entire universe. And by kid, I mean like everybody, because one of the problems is that the process of posting and of being on social media is very weird because you are usually by yourself when you are posting. And so you've got sort of this feeling of I'm with everyone and yet I am alone. And so that blurs the boundary of what should I be sharing. And then you think of the people you're saying it to. By thinking of only the people that you're connecting with, the people who respond, the people who click like, and so on, you don't think about all the other people that might also be reading it and not responding, but they're still reading it. And so suddenly something that you would cheerfully say to your 5 friends that you actually interact with, you just said to everybody and you didn't realize it. It's really hard to get kids to recognize that the information never, ever goes away. You cannot delete anything. And someday you're going to care about it. I mean, we live in a world which, for good or evil, mostly evil, everyone can search everything about everyone. I mean, think about it. Last time you searched for a job, imagine if you went in to you applied for a job and they call up and say, okay, we're going to have an interview, but we're doing interviews differently now. What we're going to do is we're going to come to your house for the interview. And while we're talking to you, we're going to go through everything. We're going to go open all your cupboards. We're going to look through all your photo albums. We're going to see what books are, we're going to pretty much scrutinize everything in your house as part of your job interview process. No one would sign up for that. Everyone has signed up for that because that's basically what they do now. There are people who got denied a job because it showed a picture of her smiling and waving a glass of booze around. She was making a toast at her sister's wedding. So it's hard to get people to recognize that. There's also the fact that when all these interactions are going on a phone that you've got on you, there's like no space. There's no, I go to school and I'm with my friends during the day, and then I'm away from them for a few hours. If you think about it, school is like this emotional minefield of, am I good enough? Do they like me? Am I included in that conversation? Am I part of that friendship group or anything like that? And then you go home and you take a break from it for a few hours. And then you go back and do it again. But now there is no break. It's 24/7. Am I included in that conversation? Am I part of that group? Do they like me? Are they clicking like? Basically, are they smiling at me or not? Is a 24/7 experience. There's this pressure to be constantly there as part of the group. They've got people told me, don't use the acronyms without explaining. There's FOMO, fear of missing out. If you remember, if you were ever sick and missed like 2 weeks of school, and you come back and how jarring it is that you feel like everyone moved on without you. Kids now get that if they turn their phone off for 2 hours. Everyone's moved on without them because it's so constant. And again, it's got that emotional enmeshment of needing to take care of each other. And by kids, I mean everybody. There's a really great article. There's a link at the end of kids trying to guide their parents to stop posting so much about them. The whole parents posting pictures of their kids that without thinking about the fact that, yeah, those kids are going to be teenagers with friends who can Google, thank you. You might want to not post pictures of the toddler doing something embarrassing. So now, adolescent development is a train wreck when it intersects with all of this stuff. Okay, we think about the things that are typical to adolescence. Okay, there's a craving belonging and validation. You want to know, do you matter? And now we've got a tool to tell you precisely how much you matter. I mean, there's even a little counter on there saying how many people like that picture of your new haircut. It's completely quantified. And at the same time, even as that is happening, the experience of the lockdown and going home made a bunch of kids just feel completely invisible, like they ceased to exist and no one noticed or cared. They went from having the daily interaction with human beings who recognize their existence on the planet to frequently nothing. And then once they got back in the classroom, a lot of it was, where's your homework? Turn on your camera. Let me see that you are there. Not let me connect with you, but just sort of a proof of life video from a kidnapper sort of thing. Another aspect of adolescence is this imaginary audience, the feeling that everyone is watching and noticing everything you do, that whole, oh my God, I can't go to school. I've got a little zit right here and they will all be pointing at it and talking about it, which was always a fiction until it became real, because now you post anything and people will scrutinize and pick up on every little detail in whatever you post. But if you don't post, they will notice that as well. And so there is this hyper scrutiny that was every adolescent's fictional terror has now been made real. But as I said, the pandemic also made people feel very invisible. When you're doing social media, we all recognize that people post the good stuff. People post what is going well. Everyone knows that this is what's happening. But we cannot save ourselves from this catch-22, where you look at what other people are posting and you feel like a total loser because look how great they're doing and how terrible I am. Raise your hand if you've unfollowed someone because you just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, there's this wonderful woman, a friend of a friend that does wonderful things. She's fascinating. I had to unfollow her because I just couldn't take it anymore. It's like, oh God, she's baking cookies today now. Oh, and her kids. Oh, and she wrote a book. Oh, and I couldn't, lovely person, but I didn't need to be looking at that all the time. And even though we know that that's what's happening and we do it ourselves, when we post our own, best of, we feel like we're lying, because we know, oh yeah, I know that I'm only posting the good stuff there. And so being on social media is alternating between feeling like a loser and feeling like a liar all the time. And even though we know that this is what's going on, we can't shake the impact of those feelings. So we all know this. How empathetic are we with people? Do we feel like online connection increases or decreases empathy in general? What do people think is the impact on empathy of the internet world and the online world and the technological access to people? I mean, there is the fact that you can connect with people far away. You can see things going on in other countries that we never used to see. And so empathizing and caring about what's going on far away became way more real. And sometimes people are more honest. People are more willing to say, yeah, I have anxiety too. Or yeah, especially if it's an anonymous thing, people are more comfortable being honest about things. Yeah, situational, exactly. Because also it's like we're more empathetic with people who are far away at the total loss of empathy with the people right in front of us. I mean, we've got so many times when you're right there with a person, but not, oh, no, I'm listening, while you're doing other things. You know, they've coined this phrase of being alone together, of having a group of people like this, where, yeah, they're there, but they're not with each other at all. There's also the fact that when people are anonymous, they can say really nasty things, not necessarily because they're being honest, but because they don't have the face-to-face experience of eye contact. Decrease in eye contact decreases empathy. Eye contact is intrinsic to empathy. You see this developing in babies, where we've got that thing called mirroring, where when you look a baby in the face and you're like, oh, aren't you wonderful? Oh, welcome to the planet. Aren't you great? You know, and it's very, very important for kids to have that on-face mirroring experience. It's a pity we don't do that for people after they're about 6 months old. And it's great because you can see babies who are like crowing, they're like, gotcha, you know, that they're looking for the eye contact, and then they light up too. But we don't do, I mean, we were noticing kind of this increased sort of callous disregard for other people's feelings long before the pandemic. And I think a lot of it is because people spend so little time looking at other people's faces. And that's really key, okay? Eye contact and eye movement is vitally important to our communication. And this is one thing that during the pandemic and doing things online and on Zoom has really thoroughly messed things up in a way that people do not fully appreciate or understand, okay? So if I'm communicating with someone and the person is not looking at me, okay, they're looking somewhere else. This does not mean that they're disengaged. It could be that two of us are looking at the same thing. And that can be a very, very connecting thing. I was on a unit at one point and there were two patients, there was a big fish tank and two patients were standing watching the fish together, having a conversation that was so much more honest and intimate and connecting than any conversation I'd ever heard between two patients before. Don't think they possibly could have done it facing each other, but shared, looking at the same thing bonds you, okay? But if you're looking somewhere else and I'm not looking, I kind of wonder, should I be looking there? Is it something that I can share with you? Is it something I should be scared of? You know, if I'm talking to you and you're looking over my shoulder, I'm like, what is that? Is that something I need to worry about? You know, is it something important, something dangerous, something good, something bad, something to connect over? Okay. Or, yeah, they're looking at something else that they should not be looking at. You know, I'm talking to people and they're all looking at the clock or looking at their watches or, you know, looking at their phones. They're looking at something that they should not be looking at. That is upsetting. That tells me they're not paying attention to me. Or at the very least, the other thing matters more than I do. You know, when you're having a conversation with someone and the person's looking at their phone, it's not just that they may or may not hear what you're saying. It's that they seem to think that that's more important than what you're saying. Now, this is how it works in normal life. You get online, you can't see where people are looking. You know, if someone's looking off to the side, I don't know if they're looking at the clock. I don't know. You know, if I was giving a presentation in a conference room and someone's just kind of looking out the window, that could be a person who listens better when they're not looking at a face. But if they're looking at the clock or the door, that's kind of telling me something. So if I can't tell where they're looking, my brain really wants to figure it out. And it can't. And it's very frustrated by this. And so that's where you get that kind of irritated feeling and that, come on, everyone, look at your cameras. Stop looking away. Because that itch in your brain of, I need to not be wondering what you're looking at because that's distracting to me, is what is driving people. The thing is, even when people are looking at you, that can be important in different ways too. Where are they looking? Okay. If they're looking at my eyes, but not just at my eyes. You know, if you've looked at studies, that people will track eye, ear, chin, eye, you know, the eyes go kind of all around the face, a little bit elsewhere. And, you know, it always comes back to the eyes, but it goes in other places too. That's what normal feels like, which is part of why having everybody staring at the camera, so it looks like everybody's looking deep into my eyes the whole time, not natural feeling, okay? Now, mind you, if they're not looking at my eyes, if they're looking at some other part of me, I need to figure out why. You know, there are things that we read into where the person is looking at you, okay? But again, as I said, if they are looking only at your eyes and never anywhere else, that's bothersome. That does not feel good after a while. Now, the other thing is that when we are face-to-face, we are looking for what emotions are displayed. And this is how we empathize. This is where empathy comes from. When I see something, I have mirror neurons in my brain that fire off, giving me the same experience as I would have if I were doing that thing. So if you are smiling, part of my brain goes, this is what it feels like when I'm smiling. Oh, I feel happy. That person is happy. Thence comes empathy. This is why it's more fun to watch a sport if you've played the sport. Okay. So if the person is mirroring mine, that's good, and we feel connected. If they are having different emotions than mine, then I need to process and understand what that difference is. You know, if I am sad and they are smiling, that's an issue. If I am smiling and they are sad, that's an issue. You know, so I need to understand what the difference is and adjust. If there's eye contact and really no sense of the emotions, they aren't varying in response to my varying. You know, if someone's smiling while I'm crying and I cry harder and they smile more, at least I know they're responding to me, you know. But if there's like no give and take, no response, I end up feeling like I'm invisible. It's like when you're in a class and the kids are just kind of looking right through you. You know, they look at you, but they don't see you. You totally don't matter, even less than if you weren't there at all. This is soul sucking. This is what we live with all the time now, where you'll have a bunch of people on the screen. They all are facing you as if they're looking at you, but they aren't interacting with you. They aren't changing in response to what you did. And it makes you feel ignored. It makes you feel worthless. It's no wonder that people get exhausted just having meetings on Zoom, because it's emotionally exhausting, feeling like you matter that little in the universe. So online communication, these are stuff I had to bring in from the thing I did about communication, because we need to understand communication to understand how technology is impacting communication, especially negatively. Okay, so communication, transfer of information generally needs to have feedback for it to be accurate, but there's uncertainty inevitably. Okay, and our brains do not like uncertainty. Our brains they want to know what's going on. They want to know, did that person hear me? I will be able to tell whether or not they heard me. Do they agree with me? I need to be able to tell if they agree with me. So the brain interprets additional information, and this is what we, nonverbal communication. The things that are not just the words we say. It might change what we said. It might emphasize. It might contradict what the person's saying. Yeah, I'm listening. When you receive a mixed message where the words say one thing and the nonverbals say something else, we believe the nonverbal. I mean, if someone is looking at their phone saying, yeah, go ahead, I'm listening to you, you know they are not listening to you, okay? They also convey the emotions. They regulate the flow of communication, the whose turn is it to talk? How do you break in and say something in a group? How does that change when you go online? It also really strongly solidifies and communicates relationships. Are you part of a group? Are you connected to this person? Are you more in charge, or are you a subordinate? And do you matter? Does anyone care about you? Okay, so the things that we're used to looking at and saying, oh, yep, that's nonverbal. Yep, facial gestures, movement, body, and what people are wearing. Sometimes you have to kind of remind people about clothing being a conscious nonverbal thing. But there's lots more nonverbal out there that we don't necessarily think that much about. Okay, there's paraverbal, for one thing, which are attached to the words we're saying and communicate a lot. Like tone conveys emotions, and whatever tone you have, the listener will assume that it's related to them in some way. If I sound angry, the listener's automatic first thought is, are they angry at me? Is their first thing that they need to clear. Okay, volume. Again, if you get loud, any loudness is perceived as anger, which then the person wonders if you're angry at me. How fast you're talking. If you're talking really fast, oh, you don't care if I'm listening. Or if I slow down and say it slow, oh, you think I'm an idiot then, huh? The rhythm and vocabulary very much indicates, that you talk differently around, other people in your community. You can use more jargon with other people in your profession and so on. And also it indicates your hierarchy. If you're going out of your way to use words that show you as stronger, or use words that are very much showing the person respect, things like that. Pronunciation similarly identifies what your group is and where your standing is in it. And then articulation is just how clearly you speak. Okay. Again, it can be mistaken for emotions. I tend to slow down and say things more clearly if I'm not being understood. And the person, I've had people, oh, now you're yelling at me. No, I was just trying to help you understand it. Or it's, oh, you think I'm an idiot, and it's seen as an insult. Okay. There's also contextual communication. All right. If you look at this classroom and you look at this classroom, you can kind of get a sense of a different message that the teacher is putting out, clearly pre-COVID, about how work is expected to be done. If you look at this classroom, yeah, communicates a lot. If you're going in to ask a favor of someone, which classroom are you going to decide? Yeah, I don't need the favor. Never mind. Would you like some help? Okay. Objects, props, activities, what you're doing communicates a lot. I can't really tell in these whether the baby counts as a prop or an activity. And then eye tracking. Eye focus and eye tracking matters hugely. They do huge studies on tracking babies' eye movements to see who's looking at what. And that communicates a lot. So for example, we got these two groups here. They're having a standoff, the greens versus the purples, okay? And the leaders, they're mad. They're puffing up and mad at each other. Which one of them should back down? Well, on the green side, all of his followers are just looking straight forward. All right. On the purple side, this dude's looking at the leader. This guy's looking at that guy. And this one's looking kind of back and forth between the other two followers. This situation, purple should totally back down. Because based on eye tracking, he does not have the support of the people with him. They are not sure if they're sticking around, and you tell that just by eye tracking. Mind you, this guy might back down based on the fact that this guy might do some damage before he realizes that he doesn't have anyone behind him, unless his eye tracking shows that he turned and saw that that was what was going on. So eye tracking tells you a huge amount. And again, all of this is gone when you're doing online communication. We took all of these rich aspects, and there's many, many more. This is a brilliant thing that someone put together. And when you go to texting, email, online, Zoom, all of that, we take all of these and we replace them with, punctuation, abbreviations, doing something in all caps, emojis, or how long does it take the person to get back to me? People who talk about how traumatizing it is watching those dots, knowing that they're typing. And when are they gonna hit send? And then when the dots happen for a while, and then they go away and the person never sends anything. People read so much into that. And when you're on Zoom, people read a lot into eye contact, forgetting the fact that everyone's had it beaten into them of look at the camera, look at the camera. I mean, this basically means you're just looking at your screen. I could totally be playing a video game and look like I'm looking at you. Eye contact does not mean comprehension. And this was a problem that kids had a lot during the pandemic when they had remote learning, because it's natural for everyone to assume if they're looking at me, they kind of got what I said. A teacher in a classroom knows that they need to slow down, back up, or rehash things when more and more of the kids are not looking at her or him. When they start looking away, then they know that they lost them. Okay. If they're all looking, they're all understanding, which is not the case on Zoom. If they're all looking, they might not be understanding. And teachers say, yeah, I know. That's why I told them anyone who needs more help can come see me afterwards. The problem is all the kids also see all the other kids looking. And they all also assume that looking means understanding. So each kid thinks that they are the only one who did not understand that. They're not likely to single themselves out and go to the teacher and say, hi, yeah, I know everyone else got it, but I'm an idiot and I didn't. And so we really got to break this idea, especially on Zoom, of eye contact being A, what you have to do all the time, and B, meaning anything. I really like if people would have, like, if you got people on Windows, say, okay, that thing I just explained, I think it was too confusing. Let me know how much you got it from not at all to fully got it. 1, 2, 3. How many fingers of how much you understand it. Something like that, so that you get a more varied thing and not based on eye contact. So when the brain does not have the nonverbal information that's used to, it makes do with whatever it's got. Okay. If we take away nonverbal communication and context, it's relying on past experience, generalization, assuming everyone else thinks the way I do, and emotional reasoning. Anything I feel dictates what reality is. And the problem is, whatever our brain interprets as true, it immediately takes as, yep, that's true. That's the way it is, which is really dangerous, especially online. And this is where we get into cyberbullying. Okay. Now, technically, bullying has 3 components. The person has to intend to harm the other person. There has to be an imbalance of power. And the most important one here, because these might be kind of blurry, is it has to happen more than once. Someone being mean once is mean. It deserves punishment. I'm not saying that, oh, it's not bullying, so just let it slide. But like if someone comes and hits a kid, that is assault. If someone hits a kid every day, that is bullying, because it not only hurts the kid in the moment, but it makes the kid know that it's coming again. It crushes their soul more than just their nose. So the thing is, a lot of cyberbullying does not fit a lot of these. Okay. The top stressors, according to kids, asked, what are the worst things? Not necessarily calling it cyberbullying, big one, public shaming and humiliation. Someone impersonating, logging in as you and looking like an idiot, which is a traditional thing. A kid would get up and in class and, hey, look, I'm so-and-so, except everyone knows that they are not so-and-so and that it's a caricature and that, it is whatever it is, whether they laugh or judge the bully. Impersonate someone online, you can make people believe that that's really them. Okay. Personal attacks, going in and using someone's stuff without their permission, pressure to comply. This one is huge. I mean, yeah, someone pressuring someone to send them nude photos is a thing, but generally there's this huge pressure to just be on social media. When I could not live as a teen right now. When I was a teenager, there's like no photographic evidence of my existence because I was beyond camera shy. I was like camera phobic, and I would duck and cover if there was a camera taken out anywhere. And now the idea of, yeah, you take a camera and you take pictures of yourself and you put them up online for everyone to see. Oh my God, that's like the 5th circle of hell in my world. But if you're not doing that, then you're not with it. And then there's smothering. Smothering, again, totally lacks the intent to do harm. Smothering is just like the person who texts you 80 times, like, will you be my friend? Will you be my friend? Hey, I really just want to be your friend. Hey, what do you think about that? Can we be friends? That's what smothering is. Okay. Whatever it is, the damage to the victim of it comes from feeling helpless, feeling cut off from everyone, and feeling like it's the end of the world. And the thing is, these are very, very, very dangerous. Remember the immediacy of connection. In the old days, if you were getting bullied in analog space, you go to school, you dread going to school, you go to school, the kid's coming across the playground and then he bullies you. And then, at some point you get to go home, get a few hours off from it. And the next day you go back and do it again. But you get the time at home away from it. And even when you're at school, there's a time when you're standing on the playground and the bully's coming across the playground towards you. When you can think, oh, if only someone would get between me and the bully and make this not happen. If you're carrying the bully around in your pocket, there's no space there. There's no place anyone could get between you and them to protect you. And it's 24/7. And in the old days, bully says something horrible to me. I remember it. Everyone who was there remembers it. Memories fade over time. Someone posts something horrible about me, I can re-experience it crystal clear every time it gets forwarded, every time I look at it again. It doesn't fade. And that's where it can feel like, yeah, if it's not fading, it's not getting better, it will never get better. And that's where catastrophic end of the world feeling comes from. Whereas even just having the memory of something fade a little bit lets you think that, well, maybe someday it will fade more. So how to respond? We do have the stop, block, and tell, which is good advice. Okay. It doesn't always fit or work. If you've got someone who's bullying you on Facebook, or I know kids aren't on Facebook now, but whatever. If someone's bullying you on the currently most popular site, and adults say, well, then just delete that app. That's like saying if you're at a party and someone's actively making fun of you, leave the party knowing that they're going to keep making fun of you to all your friends after you've left the room. Not very comforting, not hugely helpful. So there's lots of different things going on. We need to have lots of different things to do to it. And asking kids, they do only like 17% of the time say that, yeah, you should get help for others. They do jump straight to call the cops if it's nude photos. Okay. They do tend to then focus on parents more than school officials. A lot of them say, talk to them directly, especially if the person's taking over your account. Ignore them is the one for smothering, ignoring the situation for pressure to comply. Very few of them look at digital solutions, various whatever things you could build into the app. I don't know whether that's because they aren't aware of digital solutions that are available or whether they're fully aware and know that they are totally useless and not effective. But as the threat keeps changing and the responses keep changing, what you want to do is just really focus on where the damage is coming from. So, person feels helpless. You want to address that by helping them see that there's something they can do, giving them the ability to do something so that they do not feel helpless. Recognize that they feel very isolated. So you want to help them recognize and focus on what connections they do have, which does not mean say, well, I love you. Also, what other friends do they have in school that are there for them and so on? What connections do they have? And then also catastrophizing, help them picture a future in which it gets better, because they might not be having that sensation that is actually even possible. To help prevent it across the board, and a lot of these problems in general around communication, we want to actively practice socialization. Talk through situations, emphasizing empathy. This is a wonderful resource, a wonderful site. It's Autism Strategies, but it's not, it's designed for autistic kids, but increasingly it'd be really good for everyone. This particular thing is a game where they've got like 8 characters that have certain personalities. And then the kid will draw a card and it'll say something like, Lucy walked into the lunchroom and came up to a table and everyone there was laughing. And then when she came up, they stopped laughing and they looked at her and she thought they were laughing at her. What do you think was happening? What would you say to Lucy? What would you do in a situation like this? What would you do if you were one of the kids at the table? What would you do if you were Lucy? Talking through all the different sides of helping figure out how people are feeling. Now, doing the sort of, with autism, because they have fewer of the mirror neurons, you have to kind of talk them through having a conscious thought about, but stop and think about what someone who isn't you might think or feel in that situation. We kind of need to do that for everybody now. It's sort of the conversations that we tend to not think you have to have with older kids because they've been had sufficiently when the kids were, like 3. And it's like, oh, now, how would you feel if he bit you kind of conversation. We need to keep having those conversations. And we need to get people communicating in real life as much as possible. When schools are open, have them do things that are actually talking to each other, not all parallel play. Eye contact makes your brain grow synapses of empathy. It doesn't even have to be significant eye contact. You can have them play that game where you just kind of lock eyes and then you're kind of copying each other's motions, playing mirror like that of, can you copy what the other person is doing and how much do they lag? Even that would do it, because eye contact really does affect how well a person has active mirror neurons to help them understand the emotions and the experience of people around them. When it comes to bad things happening, we also want people to learn that there are options other than just confronting the bully. Sometimes if you see bullying going on, most of the time people see something bullying, and most of the time people do nothing. Mostly because they aren't sure what to do. And the only thing they can think of is confronting the bully, and that does not feel safe. Frequently because that is not safe. It might be physically unsafe. At the very least, it might be emotionally unsafe. I mean, this is why if a person in a position of power is making fun of, makes a joke at the expense of someone, everyone in the room laughs, because it's better to be on the side of the bully than to be the next victim. And so confronting the bully might not be an option. It might not be safe. There are other options. One is just comfort the victim. Ignore the bully, but reach out to the victim. So if you got a kid who saw something nasty posted about someone, they could post, hey, that's a terrible thing. You shouldn't say that. That would be great. If they're worried that they will never socially recover from taking that stance, fine. They could private message the person and say, hey, I don't like what they said. That's not true. Most people do not think that at all. I thought it was really cool when you wore whatever. Blah, blah, blah. So you could do that. Sometimes kids will be even, no, I can't. Because if I'm like friends with that kid, then I will also be the social pariah. The complex webs of socialness are complex and webby and social. But even there, any kind of contact with the victim is helpful. So it could be, okay, just text that person and ask them what the homework was. And just find some other reason to reach out to them. In real life, you got lots of reasons. Like if you're on a train platform and someone is being very aggressive towards someone else on a train platform, and you think it might, maybe it's someone who's being racist, and who knows where this could go. You don't know these people. You don't know who might be armed. So what can you safely do there? You can walk up slightly to the side and look like you're just that clueless and ask the victim, hey, do you know what time the next train is? Hey, what time is it? Or, hey, where did you get that coat? I've been looking for a coat just like that. Find any other reason to not engage with the bully at all, but just directly have contact with the victim. And what that communicates to everyone is that, yeah, there are other eyes here. You are seen, you are not isolated, you are not alone. And to the bully, yeah, someone might report you if you do anything really terrible. Maybe you should just stop now. So now when it comes to kids and teens, there's also, how do we actually interact with the person who is doing the bullying? Okay. As I said, all this stuff of lack of eye contact and the way we communicate, we're already making people pretty unempathetic in the first place. And 2 years of lockdown has not made things better. It has not necessarily made things worse. I went looking to see if there's anything about cyberbullying. And pretty much there was one study that saw a slight increase in cyberbullying paired with a steep decrease of in-person bullying when they were no longer in person. Not terribly surprising. And there's a link to that site. It had lots of really cool articles I highly recommend. But in general, we want to recognize that a lot of times these are kids, and therefore they're still learning how all this works. And much as we don't want to say, no sympathy for the bully, we go, I recognize that the bully may well have been bullied themselves. They, when we look at like suicide rates, there's increased suicide among people who have been bullied and also among the bullies. So we want to try to help the bully as well to not be a bully, both because that they won't be hurting people and also because it could help them too. So start with recognizing that they might really not appreciate the harm that they are doing. They really might not get how bad this is. The fact that it's remote communication makes it remote, makes it almost hypothetical. The fact that they don't have visual input really decreases empathy. Yes, there are people where if they say something rude and the person they're saying it to looks scared, looks sad, looks crushed, looks hurt, that makes them feel stronger, and that's what they're there for. Yes, many, many bullies are like that. A lot of the cyber bullies aren't. A lot of the cyber bullies, if they saw the pain that they were causing, would back off. The problem is they're also surrounded by a very curated audience of people who are not likely to say, hey, you shouldn't post that. That's mean. Because again, the people who will be commenting tend to be their friends. And so all of this keeps them from having even the opportunity to feel empathy about what they're doing. So we need to teach them the empathy. We need to talk to them. Okay. And you need to do it in a way that will be effective and productive, not necessarily fair. You need to recognize that if you hold out for fair, things don't get better. So yeah, I might really so hate what this person said that I've got zero interest in making them feel better about themselves as a human being so that they might hurt people less. But if I want people hurt less, I really need to put some effort into helping them feel better about themselves as a human being. So you start with meet with them privately, give them some privacy about it. And some ways that you can help them start to grasp the severity. One thing is have them read whatever they posted out loud. It's amazing how many things people are perfectly comfortable typing that they really feel uncomfortable saying those words out loud with their mouths. And that's the time to say, maybe before you send things, you should say them out loud to see whether they feel like that's too much and you shouldn't be saying something that mean. If they start to develop a little bit of breaks, point them out to them. The other thing is then you ask them, what we screw up is we'll say, well, how would you feel if someone posted that about you? Which is such an obvious thing to say that they are ready for it. And they'll be like, nah, I wouldn't be bothered at all. Or, well, I would never wear something like that. So they'd never say it, or something like that. But instead, turn it to someone else. How would you feel if someone said this to your friend, your sister, someone else that they care about, where they are now in the bystander state rather than the bully or victim? Once they're to the side looking at it, they can see it a bit more clearly, if they're seeing it through someone else's eyes. It's like the only PSA that I thought was at all effective around marijuana was a kid who's out smoking with his friends, and then he sees his little brother watching them. And that gives them the sense of, oh, wait, I would not want my little brother to be doing this. Oh, wait, I would not want someone saying this about my friend. We have to remember, if we're trying to make the world better, if they come into it with, hey, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't post anything bad, what I posted was just honest criticism of what they did. If their only choice is to double down on that, or to say, I'm a horrible human being, I'm a monster, I'm terrible, 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 they're gonna double down on I did nothing wrong and keep doing it in order to prove that they did nothing wrong. So you gotta give them another exit strategy, another way to view it as, yeah, I need to think harder and not do this, rather than I'm a horrible, horrible monster for doing it. Now, for making a plan for managing tech in general, first, we need to acknowledge that tech is a problem. even now that it is something that we are hugely dependent on during a pandemic, and it's saving our lives in many, many ways. I say it's kind of like if you got someone who's in a domestic violence situation and then their abusive spouse starts like putting them through grad school. It's like, okay, yeah, that does not make it okay that they are abusive. And so, yeah, we are very dependent on it. That does not make it any healthier, okay? And when you're talking to kids, listen to their ambivalence, listen to the things they like about it so that they feel comfortable sharing the things that they don't like about it. Listen to both sides, pros and cons. And you really want to try not to have a black and white, simplistic, this is what you should do. Now, I really like this graphic here. It completely unironically is put out by an app that that tracks how long you're using different apps. But the red dots are people who are miserable. The blue dots are people who are happy. The yellow is the general average of all users. And you see that, okay, if someone is using Instagram 60 hours or 60 minutes, that's it. That's it. How many minutes in a day? Okay. So if they are using Instagram for 60 minutes and they're miserable, the answer is not necessarily delete Instagram. It could be, well, just use it less, scale it back a little bit. You know, you look at so many of these where it's like, yeah, the more I use it, the more miserable I get. Does not mean 0 is the answer. It could mean that less is the answer. The only one people wish they used more was FaceTime. Isn't that sweet? Now, when you're making a plan, update it periodically. People grow, people change, tech grows, tech changes. You're going to need to keep updating it. You want to involve the kids in the decisions. They need to be signing on to this too. They need to feel like it's not just something being imposed on them, both because that's where true change happens and because they know the tech better than us and they can get around any other rules that are made if they aren't invested in them. Another way to get them invested in them is that the adults should also be following the plan. You know, if you want to say, okay, no texting no doing stuff with your friends on your phone after 8 o'clock, and then you turn around and you are answering work emails at 8 o'clock, the kid has a reasonable question of what's up with that. So you want to have a plan that fits everybody. And if there's an exception, then it has to be an exception that has a real rationale for it. That's not just because I'm the grown-up, but a specific rationale and or a specific trade-off for it. Try to get the plan to include minimizing that blue light, avoiding screens, and getting people to recognize that if you find yourself really twitchy, if you find yourself having a hard time delaying doing something, that is the dopamine. And if you would like to be making this decision instead of your dopamine puppy making the decision, then you need to put a leash on it and cut back, recognizing that it's going to feel worse initially. You know, I noticed that every time my phone would chirp with a text, it was really hard to not immediately at least look at it. So I started having a rule of, okay, I'm not going to look at it for 5 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes. Initially, that was excruciating. But then it got where the first time it chirps, I don't get that twitch. The dopamine rush doesn't hit me. And thus I get to be more in control of what I'm choosing to do. To help deal with all those cognitive impacts, we want to help teach people how to fact check, teach people to ask, where did this information come from? Is that person someone who would be an authority in that field? If someone is, recognize, it'd be really cool if you're in a classroom, name a bunch of topics and say, okay, who in the class is best to ask about baseball? Who is a person in the class who's best to ask about cats? Who in the class is best to ask about history? And find out that everybody has different things that they're best at. And then recognize that if I've got a question about baseball, I should not go to that person. I should go to that person because some people know more than others about stuff. And then start applying that to everything else. And not just online stuff, but also personal sources. You know, if a kid says that another kid said something, who's the best person to know what that kid said? Oh, maybe that kid. Maybe I should actually double check that as well. We want to get everybody, I know it's hard to sell in school, but we want people to feel more comfortable with not knowing things. Not ignorance is bliss, but ignorance can be a place to hang out for a while. Do not immediately rush to Google things. Stop and see. I mean, and we all, I mean, I love it when I've got big group because I can say, okay, raise your hand if you have paused the movie because I know that actor from something and I need to know what other things he's been in so that I can understand why I've got that tickle in my head of where that actor's from. I mean, it's been built into Netflix now, where if you pause the movie, it will just tell you the actor's name to make that process faster for everyone so you can get back to the movie faster. We got to stop doing that. We got to say, you know, it's okay. If I just sit with this, maybe I'll remember, maybe I won't. It's okay. I don't have to know this right now. And if it is harder or slower to get the information, you're more likely to remember it next time and interrupt fewer movies. And practice memorizing things. Teach your brain that old archaic trick of actually holding on to information for more than 5 seconds, okay? If you need to look something up, write it down. Writing in handwriting encodes stronger in the brain than just looking at it, stronger than typing it. Definitely stronger than cut and paste. So write it down. And if you want to hold on to something, like if there's a phone number that you really wish you could remember, you look it up, you write it down. And then you wait about 5 minutes and then you try to remember what it was and check yourself. And if you were wrong, and write it down again. And just keep going back repeatedly. The reason why I got Free Rice here, and I'm not sure if it still does it this way anymore. Free Rice is a great site. It does a lot of vocabulary things, so you can do vocabulary, but it's got lots of other topics as well. And every right answer, they donate 10 grains of rice to starving children. Hey, so it's a nice thing that way. But what it used to do, at least, is that if you got an answer wrong, it would leave the children starving. But then about 5 words later, it would give you that same word again. So, you know, it tells you what the right word was, and then it moves on. And then a little bit later, it gives you that same word. So it gives you a chance to actually learn by reviewing it and recalling it. If you do that, you can lock stuff in permanently. I did a going on a camping trip with a list of very, very bizarre things with a friend on a train going to visit a friend. And the next day, Devious, first friend, said to DH, other friend, they're both named David. We had to do what we could with initials. So DH says to DH, oh, we were playing the going on a camping trip game and it was so cool. What was that list? And I repeated it to him. By reviewing it the next day, I now forever remember that list that I made up my sophomore year in college. So, I mean, you might not want things stuck in your head forever, but it's worth it. So find something that you do think is worth keeping in your head forever and memorize it. Anyone know what this is a picture of? This is a picture of the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, the verbal blade went snicker stack. It's the only poem I've ever memorized because it's the only poem I like. I don't like poetry. But yeah, I wound up writing a paper on it. And thus I now know Jabberwocky forever. So you find something, anything that is worth keeping around and memorize it. Good practice. Some people have had this movie shown. They're trying to promote having a documentary shown. It's an okay documentary. It's a fantastic blog. So definitely go to this site. And I don't know if I've got it in the links. I totally should. But sign up for the Tech Talk Tuesday blog, because they'll do a little blog and then they have some questions. The idea is every Tuesday at dinner, have families talk about this stuff with their kids. And so it's here's an issue that they've noticed, and here's some questions to start the dialogue. It's not a how to drag your kid over to the right answer and make them agree with you. It's more about dialogue. It's very, very cool. It's very well done. So I do have various resources. There's links to, this is a cyberbullying one that I said has lots of really great stuff on it. This is an unironic online tool for setting up a family media plan. There's a kid and a teen version. Various good articles. InnerDrive, it's worth signing up with them. They do not deluge you with email, and then you can access all kinds of really cool infographics like the self-control one. So this is autism strategy. Oh yes, I do have screen ages up here. and free rice. But if you prefer to just watch videos, there's some really good videos about what's happening in our brains while we're doing it and how the phones are designed to be addictive. I mean, the color scheme is there because they know which colors are more likely to trigger the dopamine. You know how when you're when you want more, you scroll like that to make it do more, or like that to make it reload. It could just be a button that you push to make it add more, but instead they've got that where it kind of rolls and bounces a little. What else does that look like? It looks like a slot machine on purpose, because that's what will get you to keep doing it. There's various TED Talks that are very cool because they do talk about the pros and the cons of things, including this guy who has a lot of fun with spammers. It's funny. This is How to ADHD, about prioritization. And this is one of many videos showing kids squirming looking at marshmallows. So I'm going to put the links in here again. We are just about out of time. So people who really need to go at noon, absolutely feel free to